Hello, fellow students and Dr. D, and whoever else might be watching this. My name is Nicholas Johnson, and today I will be talking to you about my firsthand experience in the class of ENC 1102 and how I progressed throughout the course. Okay, I'm going to give it to you straight here. When I first started this class, just about the only goal I had was that I would never have to take another English or writing class ever again. And I probably had some other idea or goal too to strive for in mind, but I can't think of it now. And I think that this kind of mindset really showed throughout the course. I never really noticed this before, but when I finally did an overview of all of my assignments, I found that in every single one, the narrative and the research question changed slightly every single time. And because of this weird distorted feel you get from this, I can most closely relate it to looking at an abstract art. So for this portfolio, that shall be my working metaphor. In order to analyze the progression of my work throughout this semester and connect it to my metaphor, I will be using what I learned from discussion 9, reflecting on the course outcomes. In this post, I was tasked with identifying the learning outcomes in which I felt I had mastered and understand. For this post, I chose outcomes 1 and 3. Outcome 1 shows the mastery of being able to analyze complex text and understand the intertextual nature of the writing, while outcome 3 states that students will be able to interpret their own research and form an argument that relates to the real world. These outcomes will come in handy when looking at my later pieces of writing. Now, it's time to start with the initial sketch of my community. For every great work of art to be painted, you must first do an initial sketch that shows a rough outline of what that painting will be. In this case, it is my post in discussion 2, identifying communities to study. In this rough sketch, the foreground of it captures the scope of the research, which was to find out why people in online games will defaultly put themselves into groups. The middle ground will be my focus on comparing the interaction of the game to sociological studies like the Stanford Prison Experiment and the Jane Elliott Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes experiment. And finally, the large background of the sketch is the foxhole community that I will be studying. And with that post, I have created the first iteration of my research question and the first piece of my abstract masterpiece. Sadly, my original research question only lasted about a week until I had to repaint my canvas white in order to change my research question. This happened because I had started writing the research proposal peer review, and while writing this, I found out that I had a plentiful amount of middle ground sources, i.e. secondary sources, but I couldn't find any written sources for my background, i.e. the primary sources. So I changed the scope of my research. Now, I was looking at how these newspapers that I found produced by a sub-community in Foxhole influence the community with their propaganda. One of the main reasons that I chose this to be the new focus of was that it gave me the ability to use my community to talk about a real problem that is going on in our society, this being fake news, which is just a rebranded term for propaganda. But as I continued to investigate this sub-community, I found that these papers weren't some sort of propaganda meant to influence players with malice intent, but they were real newspapers that were meant to keep the community informed as things going on in the game. Both shocked and amazed me that a community like this existed in Foxhole without me knowing for so long. And with this new revelation about the community, I discovered a new goal for myself to reach. I wanted to help endorse the sub-community and raise its popularity by writing about it. And with this new perspective on the Foxhole community came a whole new research question that was able to survive both discussion post 4 at the top, 5 at the below that one at the top, and even the original annotated bibliography. Finally, some continuity throughout my papers. The current research question at this time was actually developed while I was talking to one of the authors of a newspaper, and he told me how his newspaper was able to unite players from different niches of the game together, creating a better and stronger community. Although I really liked the way my current research question was going, there was one problem with it. Because for my research, I was looking at 4 different newspapers, and the current narrative was tailored to fit one of the newspapers, causing some of them to stick out and ruin the flow of my writing. So, what was I to do? Well, I had to change the narrative, or what I would be focusing on in each paper. And this, my friend, is where Grant David comes in. While I was trying to rework the narrative for my analytical research paper, I completely forgot what a rhetorical situation was. So I went back to look at my response. And then, boom, as if I was Newton himself, I realized what I must do. I reconstructed my research question. To do this, I used what I learned from the Learning Outcome 1 to pick out the parts of each newspaper until I realized what each author influenced the players by educating them about the game through various different methods. And now that my boring white canvas has finally finished its journey and has become a glorious work of art, there is nothing left for me to reflect upon.